Welcome into another edition of the Blue-White Tailgate Pawcast. Post-Orange Bowl breakdown. Mike Gross of LNP, Frank Bonanni of the York Daily Record, and myself, Andrew Calissa of just the Blue-White Tailgate Pawcast. Two experts and myself taking you through. You're going to hear a lot of pings, tings, and everything going off, and that is because it is a hopping day on the Penn State football beat. Tom Allen, the defensive coordinator, he's off, taking his bags, packing up, going to the ACC. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Some guys are leaving the den, and others are fully committed to the program with unfinished business. But we got to talk about the Orange Bowl, another classic down on South Beach. 27-24, the Nittany Lions go down, ending their season 13-3. Penn State finishes in the college football semifinals. Guys, I got to ask the question, and it's, I don't ask this one a lot. Did Penn State lose it, or did Notre Dame go out and win it?
I think about equal parts. I think about equal parts both, but that's not an acceptable answer. I know you don't want to hear that, but I really thought when it was 10-0 and Penn State was clearly winning up front on both sides, and it looked like they might have knocked out Notre Dame's quarterback, I think we all thought Penn State was going to win the game. Again, their incredible inability to get the ball down the field in the passing game was the story of the season, the story of the game, and of course there were a lot of details that go into that. I think Notre Dame was slightly the better team, but I mean it sure looked like Penn State was on their way when it was 10-0.
Yeah, and same thing for when they actually, maybe even surprisingly, re-grabbed the momentum completely.
Yeah,
in the fourth quarter, because hey, the game's only half over. Notre Dame gets their quarterback back. They make a run. And at this point in the season, in the semifinals, maybe you don't have an answer. But Penn State did. And to take the lead back with 8 minutes to go the way they did it, that's when I thought, okay, Penn State's going here, because I did not think their defense would allow Notre Dame to tie the game with 8 minutes to go. So we can talk about Penn State's ridiculous inability with their receivers, but that was their whole season. To me, the difference in this game was their defense not being able to handle Riley Leonard when needed most, and also Drew Aller's interception at the end of the game. Yeah. More than anything, because they've survived with throwing to Tyler Warren and their running backs all year. And it looked like they were going to do it again. It looked like they were going to the finals without completing a pass to a wideout.
You guys hit on all three topics. The defense's inability to hold not one, but two leads, albeit at different points in the game. Drew Aller's, his inability to complete a pass to a wide receiver, and just the wide receiver's inability to get open, which was a season-long theme. Let's start with the defense. How surprising was it for you guys? We'll go with the second lead, that at 8-minute mark, when Penn State grabs that momentum, they come back from being down 17-10, tie the game there, get the interception, they go up 24-17, and then allow Notre Dame to come back down the field. How surprising is it that this Penn State defense allowed that to take place?
Go ahead, Frank. You said
it. It was surprising because people, they probably noticed, but Notre Dame lost two starting linemen that game, including their true freshman all-star. And I just think that I really thought that even that drive started, I thought Penn State was going to maul them on defense at that point. And that they didn't, I guess you have to give a lot of credit to Riley Leonard and Notre Dame for hanging in there, because the pressure was relentless, but I actually thought it would get home more. Part of that may be that Abdul Carter played less in the second half than he played in the first. I mean, the shoulder definitely was an issue. But just an unbelievable, inexplicable error on allowing that wide open touchdown. How many times have we seen that? We've seen it, once or twice this year? But I mean, to have that happen at that point in the game I just never would have predicted, never saw that coming.
Well, you mean when Cam Miller fell over?
Yes.
Yeah,
And Cam Miller fell down and Jalen Reed just basically sat down.
Sat down. Yeah, two guys fell down. Yeah, that was crazy. I'm tired of hearing myself talk about the wide receivers, but let me just point out that on that play, that was Notre Dame's number 3 wide receiver, Jaden Greathouse. At least statistically, he was their number 3 wide receiver. He had 10 catches for 100 and some yards and a touch. Yeah, in a touchdown. And half the yards were on that play because guys fell down. But that's not the point. The point is their number 3 wide receiver was targeted 7 times. You think Penn State, can you imagine Julian Fleming or anybody or somebody like that on Penn State getting targeted 7 times? I'm not talking about when you're playing Kent State. I'm talking about when you're playing at this level. So that was just an extreme breakdown on one snap, and I thought overall their defensive line played great. I thought Carter played great. I thought that denied Dennis Sutton interception, which was not only a great play by him, but also looked like a really odd. Whatever Penn State was doing schematically there looked really weird or not weird, unusual, and it worked. So they did a lot of things right, and there were some glaring things that they did wrong, and here we are.
Drew Allar's performance, we talked about it on last week's podcast. Frank, you and I talked about it on the phone as you were traveling when we were recording, about Drew Allar's need to make 5 or 6 more throws than he made in the Boise State game for Penn State to win this football game. 5 or 6 more throws, even with how he played, gets the job done, you would think, with how this game played out. I mean, we pretty much hit the nail on the head with the prediction on how it happens. So where did it go wrong for Drew Allar in this football game to play? I know you touched on it at halftime with a quick column at half on it being like 4 of 12 at the break for Drew Allar. Got a little bit better in the second half, but then it all quickly unraveled real quick, real fast at the end of the game for him.
Yeah. Drew seemed like he had some mechanical issues, at least in this game. I'm not sure if that kind of goes through the whole playoffs, but the whole postseason, he barely completed 50% of his passes, which is not where he was trending going down to the end of the season. This is a different Drew Allar who struggled, and you could definitely see in this game from watching some replays that his mechanics were just not good. He was fading away on passes. He was not stepping into it. And maybe no more so than the short toss to Nick Singleton. If he completes that pass, this game probably is different. One pass, one play in the first half. Okay, so I'm going to say this. Nick should have caught the ball, okay? But the pass should have been better. And there's no reason for Drew to not throw that ball right there in his chest. Okay, so that was just the reason I bring it up is it kind of to me symbolizes a little bit of his entire night. He underthrowing guys in the end zone. He was bailed out twice. The last throw, a poor decision, and you could see. I mean, he blew the protection on the interception. He did not step straight up into the pocket. He had got great blocking. He faded off to his left, which put him and everyone else at risk. And that happened multiple times for some reason, on Thursday.
There were multiple times. That's really on point, Frank. There were multiple times when they pass blocked really well and they formed a pocket and he kind of drifted out of the pocket. Mm-hmm. Now the offensive linemen have their back to him. They don't know that he's exited the pocket. They're kind of doing their job. There were times when he could have stepped up and climbed the pocket, and he has done all of this stuff in the past. So I wonder if there isn't a little bit of maybe let's bring in a sports psychologist or something like that. I wonder if there isn't an anxiety issue with him. And I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to be a jerk about this and use the choke word or anything like that. But I just wonder if there is a piece of that in these big moments. You're talking about a guy who, for most of this season, as you alluded, Frank, 72% completion rate. And then when the season's on the line, 52% or something like that. And some of those things with footwork, it's not really so much footwork in terms of the mechanics of the throwing motion as footwork in the context of the play, in the context of everything that's going on around him. That seems like it has become an issue for him. And now he's got some time in the offseason to maybe work on it. He's got people around him that can help him work on it. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm not ready to give up on Drew Aller yet.
I
100%.
Yep.
I'm not going to say that. It's just a little perplexing that at this point in his career or the season, you saw the struggles. I would have expected, in some regards, almost the opposite. So they got time to figure it out, I guess. I mean,
I think this is definitely the best secondary they played against this year, and maybe the best secondary in the country. And you go back and watch some of the video of this game, and some of these like coaches film things that I've been looking at the last 24 hours, and Notre Dame's secondary is really, really good, but that's not the entire explanation.
Going off of both of those points that you guys just made, having said all of that, with Notre Dame's secondary being really good, with Drew Aller in the game and in those moments seemingly regress from what he's done all season long, where we watched a progression of his maturity and feeling the pocket and being able to make throws, throwing some receivers and his tight end open at times like that. With the 2 interceptions that got wiped out by penalties, are you surprised that air was put in the football with Penn State in their own territory, even after that in that final possession with that 12-yard run at that point in the game? Are you surprised that air was put in the football knowing that Drew Aller was struggling and all the coaching staff could see him not feeling the pressure and pointing things out incorrectly all night long?
I'm not surprised, because you're going aggressive and you're going for the win,
right,
and you don't have much time, but you have enough time to hit a few plays to get in field goal range and just end this. And I think they have faith in Drew Aller. Would I have, as a play caller, I mean, I don't know. Would you maybe have tried to run one more time after Nick's big run? Probably not. I probably would throw the ball, and that was no problem. The problem was the decision. And I think you maybe expected him to be off target or to throw it out of bounds or to hold on to the ball too long, but I wouldn't have expected him to throw a pick like that, because he doesn't do that.
100% agree with what Frank said. The one thing that Aller, even when he has not been hitting on all cylinders this year, is he doesn't throw it to the other team very often. I mean, that's one thing that he has been really good about through his career. And of course, that was a glaring exception at the worst possible time. But yeah, I'm okay with that.
Greg McElroy, former Alabama quarterback, giving him the ultimate jinx on the broadcast, basically saying what you just said.
He really defended him.
Jinx. That was the worst of all quarterback jinx that could possibly happen on a television broadcast. What does this game do for a former Penn State beat writer? Reached out to me in a text message saying this game just cements Penn State's reputation nationally, with Notre Dame being down 2 offensive linemen, their best defensive player being missed, having complete control of a game, double-digit lead late, and it just cements their inability to win a marquee game. And then I have people all around me throughout college football, Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, texting me saying Penn State will never beat a marquee team when it matters. That's the reputation.
Well,
does this game cement that? And specifically, does it cement that coming back to James Franklin, because he's taking a lot of the heat in the national media with the graphics being shown up immediately after the broadcast, the 1-18 record?
I was a little, not surprised maybe, but struck with how many people I saw on social media and just in the general, like the reaction I get from readers and all that stuff, who did not kill Franklin about this, who kind of said, the players were in position to win the game and the players failed to execute. That was the surprisingly sort of sober, thoughtful take that I was getting from And it's always unscientific. You're just sort of paying attention to what you notice. But I mean, as far as perception, yeah, this does sort of cement that can't win the big one thing. You haven't been paying attention to sports very long or thinking very hard about what you're watching if you were saying never. They're never going to be a marquee team. That shows me that you're not using your brain. Your heart is short circuiting your brain. But that's the perception. Yes, what you said, Andrew, is the perception right now. No question.
Yeah, I mean that's the easy national line that fans have, and I think the thing is this, and we all we can go back to this. What coaches have great records against top 5 competition? There's a reason. Ryan Day's record is not very good against it. Joe's record was not great against it, especially later in his career. Doesn't mean you can't have success. And yeah, I think Mike's point is good because I think this game looked a little different than some of the other defeats that they've had, say, to Ohio State and such, because I think it looked like Penn State had the right plan, had the right people in place, and that the players just, not to pile on anyone in particular, they just didn't make the plays. I mean, I'm not sure, and little things add up, right? In games like this, because we're in the Final Four teams. So Abdul Carter has a bad shoulder. He can't recover that fumble that Deni Dennis Sutton caused. I mean, Notre Dame's backup quarterback gets a lot of credit, which he deserves, but he also got crushed and lost the football on a play that Penn State easily could have recovered, and it looked like Abdul Carter was going to, but I don't think he could actually use his left arm to try to get the ball.
Yeah, I think that was clearly that. Watching the replays of that play, I mean, that was right in front of him, and he physically couldn't go get it because of the injury. That's how
it was a great play. Deni Dennis Sutton played his best college game, but you have a couple of things go your way and it's a different outcome, but that's the semifinals, right? That's the Final Four teams where you got to overcome things and make a play. I mean, here's the other thing. I never thought Riley Leonard was coming back onto the field in the third quarter.
Right.
Going to the injury tent with concussion protocol. If he doesn't come back, it's a different game. You recover. It's little things. And Penn State simply didn't either make or come up with a few little things that make all the difference in this type of game. Not against UCLA 3 months ago, in this game. And that's what I think the semifinals are always going to possibly be about that.
Cam Miller falling over. That play you just mentioned with Abdul Carter. The easy touchdown if Singleton catches the ball or Aller throws it and puts it in the perfect spot. Zion Tracy calling for a fair catch on the 2-yard line. I mean, that wasn't as big as the others, but I mean, stuff like that. Yeah.
But that was a great play call on the throw to Nick Singleton. Yeah. So Penn State coached that situation up well. Yeah. It was a great call. Yeah. They just did not make it, and Nick Singleton plays his butt off on every play, it seems like. And at times I think there's still some disconnect on some of the other guys mentally. And you mentioned Zion Tracy, and, it's just that if you maybe can get things dialed in a little bit on some of these guys who are coming back, maybe you have a different scenario going forward next year, and amazingly, a lot of these guys potentially are coming back. So
a wise writer on the Penn State beat wrote this in their grades. Notre Dame looked to be taking a physical beating at halftime, more so than the score indicates, but the Irish flipped the script and changed the tone, whether by making physical adjustments or mental and emotional ones. Yet again, in the biggest spots, Penn State did not. That came from a very wise writer on the beat. That person is actually on our screen right now. That was Mike Stroh's line regarding coaching. And I brought that up because, to me, James always talks about the middle 8. And if there was one spot where Penn State failed in this game coaching-wise, it was the middle 8. And I say failed because that is where Notre Dame took it to Penn State and totally flipped the script of this game. And not from the final 4 minutes of that first half to the opening 4 minutes of the second half, Notre Dame completely changed the football game in that. And Al Golden was able to reestablish everything that they wanted to do defensively from the Irish.
Well, I think driving the ball right down the field at the first possession of the second half was very significant. Yeah, I thought that was a big deal, and yeah, you know, the game really changed after halftime. You talk about the middle eight, but the middle eight is really like, it's not like you do anything different because it's the middle eight, unless halftime adjustments. That's part of it, of course, but you're just trying to make plays. But yeah, that's true. Penn State usually fares pretty well in that middle eight, which of course we're talking about. If anybody doesn't know, the last 4 minutes of the first half, the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. So they did lose that portion pretty decisively. Yeah.
Right. And Notre Dame is a better team. They're a better team they're better for the sum of their parts than they are individually. And I think it showed that it's easy to kind of look at them and think, well, you should beat them. I mean, Penn State should beat them, but you take out of the account really how they've won 11, 12, whatever games in a row. And it's their ability to just overcome, persevere, be tough, all the cliches, they actually make them real. And I think sometimes that's difficult to beat. And you can't always put your finger on it, because I don't think Penn State necessarily played poorly in their design they didn't give up. They certainly came back. They weren't drastically different than who they were at other times. I think they faced a team, though, that did not, like Ohio State, of course, but did not bend at all when they were being shoved down. And I think it's easy to do that against Penn State's. It can be intimidating. Penn State's defensive line and their pressure can be intimidating. When you have Denied Dennis Sutton pointing at your face before the snap saying, I'm getting you, okay? And then you go and you rake the quarterback. There's other teams that can't handle that. There's other teams that can't handle Penn State's two running backs going at them for 2.5 quarters and more. But this team could.
Yeah, that's. I think that's right. I think Notre Dame is a very mentally and physically tough team consistently for 60 minutes overall. However, this was a winnable game for Penn State. Mm-hmm. This was absolutely a winnable game, and that's what people are going to be shaking their heads about in Nittany Nation going forward here. This was a winnable game. I would argue more than Ohio State or Oregon, the other two losses this year, even though those games were very competitive. This was a game that Penn State certainly could have won. I think most fans, hardcore fans, are going to say they should have won, which is a different thing, but they certainly could have.
I agree. They should have. And I think it feels differently than the other two.
Yeah.
It's the one game where I leave thinking, you should be playing in the national championship right now, because you don't always get these opportunities, and it should have been theirs. They should have won the game from their point of view.
Yep.
I worry, and I agree with Frank, that this should have been a Penn State win based on everything that went on. And again, with those two leads and, a pass on the back hip, kind of down below the butt, that could have been caught, should have been a better pass. Those little things add up. I worry about a hangover if you're a Penn State fan going forward. We in professional football and as college football, you get to 16 games, and the losing Super Bowl team, you always talk about that Super Bowl hangover. Well, as guys are declaring for the draft, and what's Penn State teams going to look at? Cam Miller, already in the transfer portal for Penn State, and things like that. What is the hangover from this game from Penn State going forward? Because the team is going to look a lot different next year. We already know with Tom Allen, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. Do you guys see a possible hangover coming into next year, or do you see the team building off of this loss and using it as momentum going forward?
Well, I don't necessarily see either of those things. I think I think by the time we get to August, this will be this will be in the rearview mirror, and it's going to be a different team next year. And I think potentially it's going to be about as good a team. We'll see. We don't know. Lots of things could, and lots of things have changed in the last 3 hours. But I think I don't think this is something that can't be recovered from, to dangle a participle or whatever.
No, I agree. I mean, it feels that way to me right now, but we are so close to it still. And I think you're not going to change probably by a week from now, maybe, but 3 weeks from now, a month, 3 months from now, I think it's different. And I think we'll jump ahead. Like, for example, the vibe of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen almost stunningly both deciding to return. That's going to be the type. I mean, there's many reasons maybe why they're doing it and together. But what big one is, I think the team knows that they're close and that they can be better. And to have, like, for example, two of those guys coming back, that's huge for not just the production on the field, but the makeup of the team going forward.
All right, let's get in. I keep checking my phone. I'm not being ignorant when anybody's talking, and for anybody watching on YouTube, as I'm looking at my phone, it's just as everything's changing. Every time my phone beeps, I'm like, is somebody else leaving or is somebody else coming in the transfer?
News is constantly breaking.
Exactly. That's what I'm looking at. Tom Allen to Clemson as a defensive coordinator. Pete Thamel breaking that. Not sure if that's 100% confirmed, but that was all the rage this morning. Are we surprised by it that it's a 1 year? I know I said to one of my former bosses when Tom Allen was hired as Penn State's defensive coordinator, I said, Tom, don't buy a house in State College, was my comment. I'm a little shocked that it happened in year one. Your thoughts on him leaving after 1 year, and where does Penn State go from here at defensive coordinator?
I certainly didn't see this coming. But James Franklin and Dabo Swinney are really good friends. And I wonder if, I'm not saying that Tom Allen got pushed out the door, but I wonder if James and Dabo communicated a little bit about this situation. Because it just seems very strange to me that Tom Allen, maybe Clemson just threw more money at him. Maybe it's that simple. But Clemson, when they were winning national championships, was playing defense as well as anybody. And then their coordinator, Brett Venables, went to Oklahoma. And since then, they have not been very good defensively. They've been just okay at best. I don't know. I don't know if maybe there's something. I don't even know what I'm saying, but like maybe there's something going on here that is more than the simple stuff that's been reported.
Let's help you out here, Mike. I think it's a personality fit, non-fit. I think, you have a lot of things at play. Tom's coming off being a head coach. His transition to D coordinator, none of his knowledge or anything else was ever questioned, but the transition was a little bumpy, a little awkward feeling from the outside, getting him back into that role, whether it be just the way it looked, whether he's on the sideline or the box or just the feel of it. And I don't know if I mean, it's not like I have inside knowledge, but it just would not surprise me if after coaching one season, he just never felt that there was not a comfortable fit there. And it doesn't shock me, a guy coming from his, it's like a little like Manny Diaz in that, was there any long-term longevity ever figured into this match? Probably not. Now, and then having said that, if you go in there and all of a sudden it just doesn't feel right, then nothing surprises me. And to me, from the outside, it just didn't, I never got the impression that it just felt smooth. I think they did a great job. They had great personnel.
Yeah.
I don't think he underperformed per se, but me, the biggest thing now was, well, what kind of direction do they go in because to replace him? Because it now seems they are all in with being able to spend money and try to get the best candidate possible. So how do they maneuver going forward? Do they just go with someone outside the staff with big money, or would they consider someone from within? Because they've also done that recently with good results, right? Ty Howe, former Penn State Nittany Lion, Deion Barnes, former Nittany Lion,
Dan
and
Con-
is this the last move of the staff either? We don't know that.
Yeah, I would if I had to bet one way or the other on that, I would say no, it's not the last move. But what you said, Frank, is interesting because it does seem like they're all in. So you're telling me Tom Allen, Clemson outspent Tom?
No,
Tom
I don't think it's about
I know
money.
you're not asserting that, but I'm saying that's sort of the if you sort of accept this on surface at face level, that's what you have to conclude, and that's hard to believe. That's hard to believe. So maybe there is something that wasn't working quite the way somebody wanted it to, whether it's Franklin or Allen or whatever.
From an outsider's perspective, I'm with Frank that the personality, knowing and covering Indiana from a distance when covering Penn State and seeing Tom Allen's personality on the sidelines when he was a head coach, it wouldn't shock me if there was a personality difference, like fit, non-fit, like you kind of said, Frank, with that transition. And Tom Allen always struck me as a very strong personality. Meanwhile, Manny Diaz, when covering him when he came to Penn State, I kind of felt like he just kind of went with the flow. His personality was like his hair, just slicked back and casually cool and just molded it right in and was going to deal with it. And I remember asking Manny Diaz when he first got here, because Dan Connor was hired as an analyst, his face lit up. He's like, I'm coming in here to coach defense at Penn State, and I could look over and I have Dan Connor sitting across the table, and there's a guy who knows exactly how it's done here, how it was done here, and he knows it better than anybody else, and I could just bounce things off of him, and he's done it at every single level of football. So with Manny, I always felt that he was comfortable here, and you just knew it was a matter of time, most likely being 2 years before he wanted another piece of the pie.
Right. Yeah,
and this kind of feels different.
Yeah, he was going to be a head coach probably sooner or later, but probably sooner. But as far as his personality, when in terms of the substance of coaching, even in the little taste of it that we would see going up there for practice, he was a very strong personality and a very strong teacher and a guy who, he's got there with cleats on running around. He was my sense of him as a teacher of football, as a schemer and a teacher of football, he was very strong in what he believed, had very sort of a unique way of doing it, believing what he believed in and teaching it. He seemed a little bit stronger in that way than Allen did. Although, again, like Frank said, I don't think Allen did a bad job.
Well, of course not. They were top 10 again. In some ways, it may have looked a little differently how they went about it, but they were statistically just about every bit as good as they were the previous year and the year before that, and maybe even the year before that.
Yeah, Penn State has been good defensively for a while now.
Who do you like to go? Who do you like to replace them?
I don't have anybody specific in mind, but I think they go big. I think they
have to.
Oh, I think they look at D'Anton Lynn, which you brought that up, Andrew. I think he's on the table for sure.
Yeah, I don't think they go inside. I don't think they promote anybody.
Agreed.
No way.
And I don't want this to come off as, oh, well, you're only saying D'Anton Lynn because it's a Penn State guy. This is a guy, he has defensive coordinator experience, obviously with UCLA, and then being hired 1 year at USC. Changed the culture a little bit at USC where they actually wanted to tackle somebody or seemed to want to tackle somebody at least this year. James Franklin has had great success with actual Penn State guys. Deion Barnes is doing a great job along the defensive line. Tyler Howe is doing a great job with the tight ends. So it's not just about you have to go out and find the best person. But if the best person is possibly a Penn State guy, then go out and get him. And if it's D'Anton Lynn, fine. He's a football guy. He's a football mind. His dad was the head coach in the NFL, knows Penn State very well, is going to be able to recruit both coasts now with his time down in Texas from his time down there in the connections. And then I do think Dan Connor is going to get promoted full-time two linebackers coach. I do.
Mhm.
Yeah, that feels like it's already happened to me.
Yeah, if that's not official on paper,
You're right. It hasn't. Yeah.
I mean, it probably is like official on paper, but regarding NCAA rules and staff limitations or whatever that is. I mean, but that's what it's always felt like to me. The coming and going, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Drew Aller coming back is obviously huge news. But we already known that weeks ago as Bo Prabula announced his transfer portal destination to Missouri. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton coming back. I don't think it shocked a lot of people inside the program. I think a lot of people outside the program are shocked. But you guys, did you get a sense of them? What was the sense in the locker room after the game? Did you have a sense that they were going to come back?
It was dead silence in the locker room. They were all disgusted at losing. But I'm almost stunned that Katron Allen is coming back. It's certainly nothing against him. I just can't believe that for a fourth year, that kid who just wants to bang the door down and score touchdowns is going to be okay with coming back and sharing the load again. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just strikes me like we had Matt Millen basically tell us that both of them are ready for the NFL now. Okay. So Katron Allen in a lot of ways showed that in the postseason that he's ready. I mean, it wouldn't have shocked me if he decided to leave and transfer to be the number one guy somewhere, the undeniable number one guy, or go to the NFL. But I never would have thought that with Nick coming back, he'd also come back. So, but it's a bonus. I mean, I think if you can lock that kid in and get some of that every single down mentality that Nick has, the sky's the limit. I think that's something to be said that's hard, right? But who else in the country is going to have two guys that potentially good and that experienced? And I think there probably is more to gain from both of them in the pass game if you needed it, so.
The offensive linemen that they have coming back, plus these two guys coming back, they should be able to run the hell out of the ball.
I mean, we're waiting on their linemen, right? Because we don't know.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I'm saying if like, I mean, Nick Dawkins is in play to come back. Van Guyon is in play to come back. So is Drew Shell. Now, do they get them all back? If they do, I don't see how this is not the best offensive line in forever next year.
I look at with these two guys coming back, I go right back to 1994. And I know that's a high standard. But when you look at what Nolan Rucci, since he was able to come into the lineup and what they did towards the end of the season, that Nick Singleton's third touchdown of the game, was it number 3? The one where Nolan Rucci comes across from the right side and has this guy
what you're talking about.
On the reach. I mean, these were constant. I mean, it didn't matter what game that was. It was Oregon, Notre Dame, SMU, Boise State. Those were constant film cuts. All you did was change the color of the uniforms for Nolan Rucci on that right side. And the same goes for the offensive line every time you were running. They
were killing people in the second half of the year, which you're not accustomed to ever seeing at Penn State. And the thing is, you lost Anthony Donko the second half of the season. He'll be back.
But he's coming back, yeah.
Cooper Cousins is ready. He just didn't get a chance to really play. So I think it's not just about the talent, but also the depth, because you're going to lose
the Sal Wormley thing, spot, and maybe, I don't know, and maybe be an upgrade. But with Singleton and Allen, one of the things that I had heard, and it was too anecdotal to report or anything like that, but what I had heard was that Katron was gone and Nick was going to stay. And Nick wasn't as in love with sharing almost 50-50 the workload and wanted to be a guy who was going to get 20s plus tackles. So I was very surprised about this. Of all the possibilities here, Nick stays and Katron goes, Katron stays and Nick goes, both of them go, or both of them stay. Both of them stay, to me, would have been the least likely. Would have been the least one that I would bet on. Yeah. So I was very surprised by this. and it's good news for Penn State, and maybe it says something about Penn State in terms of NIL, keeping these guys happy, and also in terms of the culture. You know, I can't even believe I just said culture. I sound like a football coach, but you know, that they want to stay in this situation when clearly they had other options. And the other thing I've heard about Nick Singleton a lot, and he actually has said this, I believe, is it's very important to him to be a high draft pick. He wants to go in the first round. Well, he wasn't going to go in the first round if he turns pro this year. So that's still out there. Is that out there with those two sharing the workload completely? Well, we'll see. But it certainly is good news for Penn State's football team in 2025.
I don't think or let me rephrase this. I don't think we should discount sharing the load and the workload that is taken away for their legs going to the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Franklin is talking about that all the time, and it's a real thing. That's a real thing.
I think sometimes fans lose sight of that is, well, he wants to be the number one guy. Well, if they could still put up the numbers and Nick could still get his flash and dash runs, and Katron could look like he's running, as you said earlier this year, Mike, pissed off, and still showcase the great feat with this offensive line coming back, then I think it actually serves both of their purposes to not be the number one guy to have 25 carries a game. To keep
you know, if neither of these guys is ever going to have a season where they run for 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 yards, well, the NFL can figure that out. They're not thinking, well, he doesn't have big numbers. You know, they're not stupid. So in that sense, yeah, it could work well. And plus, running backs have a short shelf life. You know, so anything you can save in the tank physically is useful, I think.
You mentioned Cooper Cousins. I put out a tweet. I saw him on, and here it is on my phone. I'm going to put it up on screen here. Just hanging out after the game as everybody's walking off.
Everybody was walking off. I saw that too. Yeah.
He just hung out there, and every single player that went by, he made sure he went up and greeted. And I thought, from a freshman, this is the type of leadership that James Franklin talks about. And this is coming from a freshman going up to every single staff member, every single player on that team, making sure he's the last person they seen before they're leaving that field. I thought that was a very good moment. I thought that showed a lot of stuff for the team going forward. And I know I talked about, do we worry about a hangover from this game? The answer to me being is this a hangover or not a hangover? This tells me this will not be a hangover. Excuse me, the volume right there. This will not be a hangover.
Yeah, I don't
leaving this game because of guys like Cooper Cousins. And
agreed. Yeah, I don't think they're hurting for that kind of stuff. I think Nick Dawkins is that guy. I think in his own way, Carter was that kind of guy. I think Drew Aller, in his own way, a much different way, is that kind of guy. They're okay in that regard, I think.
Frank, for you, with Carter gone, Jalen Reed announcing that he's leaving for the NFL, Kimber announcing that he's declaring for the NFL draft. I don't know if it's the number 3 vibes that I get. I don't really like him declaring for the NFL draft after what happened with Kalen King last year. Zane Durant coming back. Deny Dennis Sutton. Is he the most important person Penn State has to have say they're coming back now that Allen and Singleton have said they're coming back?
Oh, absolutely. Hands down. I mean, there's other guys that are important in varying ways, but he's a game changer. I mean, he's an All-American type guy, and he finally really, he had that injury in the middle of the season, and he had Abdul Carter playing on the opposite side and all, but he finally showed you the last few games why he was a 5-star recruit, why he was so good. So yeah, he's a difference maker as to what they get back. I think they can handle everything else from here on out. And I'm not saying they don't have young edge rushers, because they do, but they don't have anybody who's ready to step in and be a dominator like that guy is. And that's to me the last big piece. I mean, Nick Dawkins is big, but if Nick leaves, they'll be okay.
Yeah.
They potentially, and they'll be okay if Deny Dennis Sutton leaves, but him coming back would add a level of possibility that most teams do not have in college football next year. Most teams will not have a guy like Denai Dennis Sutton coming off the edge. Physically, experience, all of it. So we'll see.
100%. That's huge. He's a terrific player.
Is it too
And
early?
Kobe King would be big. You know, I think Kobe King is a little underrated in that regard if he would come back, because there'd be a glue piece you wouldn't have to kind of figure out in the middle of your defense, but not the same, just not the same way as Denai.
Where does this season rank for Penn State in terms of the last 30, 40 years, in terms of what they were able to accomplish, and how would you grade the season A minus in terms of expectations coming into this year?
Okay, well, I would say, the glass half empty way to look at this is they beat all the teams they should beat, and they lost to everybody else. So that's what they've basically done recently under Franklin. So this is no different than any other recent era season, except that they had a more favorable playoff format and then a crazily favorable bracket in the playoff. So if you're being a harsh pessimist, you would say, well, there's nothing special about this season at all. That's kind of, I guess I'm a harsh pessimist, because that's kind of where I would fall. There's a breakthrough that has to happen that hasn't happened, that in terms of the James Franklin era. I think he would tell you that if we injected it with truth serum. But that's kind of how I see it. So I would give the season a B, I guess.
That is a little harsh. I think it's definitely a step forward, because, you had favorable matchups, but you also played more games than you've ever played before in a season, and you won more games than you ever won before in a season. And I think when you keep playing games, there's things that can go wrong. There's injuries that can derail you. There's circumstances that can get in your way. And for them to be this, to me, is their most consistent team ever, and under Franklin. And I think that says a lot, because that is becoming, to me, increasingly harder to do in college football with the parity and with the transfer portal and everything else. So I give them bonus for that. Is it Franklin's best season? The only one that would be potentially better to me would be 2016. That gets kudos for being kind of a breakthrough year. But to me, you can't disregard the consistency and continuity that got them within a couple of plays of the national championship game. They have not been to the national championship game in 38 years. This team is not better than 1994, but out of all the teams I covered since then, could you make an argument this is number 2 in the past 30 years? I think you could. I'd give it an A minus.
I would still take 16 over this team, I think. Just because, that team was realistically at worst the number 5 team in the country going into the postseason, right?
And this team's number 4.
And this team, well, not really.
And I'll say this: that season ended not a lot unlike this one. They blew the game against USC because
very similar comparisons.
They couldn't play defense the way they should have. And this one, they maybe couldn't play offense. And they lost both of them on basically last-minute field goals. So in games that they had double-digit leads and should have won. So
again, though, Frank's point is a good one. This team was more consistent than that one. Think about how that team played in September compared to this one. It's no comparison. You're right.
Yeah. That team came a lot further. This team was more, the foundation was built a lot more obviously.
They're more like Arizona State was this year, where they just caught fire and became the hot team and ended up being better than anybody would have figured.
Yeah.
In terms of James Franklin's team, I still put the 16 team up there as his best coaching job. I'm putting this one right behind him because at multiple times the Ohio State game being a tough game to get over, they're able to bounce back, kind of back their way into the Big Ten championship game, have a chance to win that game against a high offensive power team. They don't win that game. Game ended kind of how the Orange Bowl ended, on an interception, although, that was a shot down the field instead of trying to throw it away over the middle of the field. But they proved something in that game, that they could go up against a team that could score points, and they were able to come back, even though it seemed at times they were overmatched. So I think they grew in that game, and they got better. And I don't think we've said that a lot in James Franklin's tenure, where they've lost a football game and you're able to say they got better after the loss. So that's why I'm putting, this James Franklin coach team, and dealing with a longer schedule, I put that right up behind 16, the 2016 team with Saquon Barkley. I don't put it in the 94-05 category, and I have everybody else in that 08 category with the Darryl Clark-led Nittany Lions. But, kind of like it reminds me a lot of the 1991 team, just characteristic teams, like with the Tony Sacca team that went 11-2, and also the 96 team that won the Fiesta Bowl against Texas with Wally Richardson. Maybe this team is a little bit better than that team, but there was a lot of similarities on that team, except that team had a wide receiver in Shafi Fields that could actually get downfield and make plays. But there are a lot of similarities on those teams.
One of the things we're talking about again here, it's sort of we're all saying in so many words, is that beating everybody that you should beat is harder to do than people think. I mean, that's what it comes out to. Yeah.
The one thing about all those teams I just mentioned, the 91 team kind of laid a foundation that there were better days to come ahead for Penn State after finishing number 3 in the country, that they should have taken steps, even though more recent years right after that, they took a step backwards. But the trend was there. 96 team, they were ranked number 1 twice in the next 3 seasons. And then 16 team was also a step forward. And 08, the 09 team was actually supposed to be very, very good as well. So hopefully that trend continues, whereas this team took steps forward with all these guys coming back, especially the running backs, more importantly, the offensive line, with just a little bit of talent on the outside to catch 2 passes. Just 2 passes. 2. A hitch route. Just a hitch route. A wide receiver jailbreak screen. Something. Anything that we need to cover, guys, before we take a couple weeks off here and get into transfer portal talk and everything else and the coming and going, because Blue-White game is on April 20th. Am I correct? I mean, it's going to, what is it, like 90 some days? Less than 90?
There we go. Here we go, baby. Well, it's going to be, and then those 90 days are going to be eventful, I think. And even looking ahead to the next sort of formal Penn State thing is that June meeting with the media that James has sort of made a tradition now. But yeah, there, even between now and then, there will be a lot of, well, obviously that's more than the Blue-White game, but yeah, there will be a lot of stuff happening over the next couple of weeks. It's a year-round beat, as we know.
I didn't go into the mailbag a lot. I did get some emails. Most of them we covered, but they were more direct on who blew the game, this and that, regarding the coaching staff. I didn't think we needed to get to those directly. We did. I did have one curious question, and it goes for this. This comes from Chad. He didn't tell me where he's at, but I hope you guys are doing well. What former Penn State University football player did we think was going to be a star in the NFL for years to come, but they ended up basically being a bust? Thanks again for your time. Love the stuff that you guys are doing on the show. So that's kind of apropos to kind of end the show as we head into draft season right there. So what Nittany Lion star did we think was going to be a superstar in the NFL that kind of ended up being the bust? I don't like throwing around the term bust words a lot, but, because it's harsh. I mean, I think for me, though, it's hard. And I mean, I guess you could say when Penn State had Courtney Brown and Laura Arrington go number 1 and number 2, I know LeVar made a lot of all-pro teams early on in his career, but then he had the injury bug, the motorcycle accident, and Courtney never really got it going with Cleveland. I would think those two kind of collectively didn't live up to all the hype, for number 1 and 2 draft picks.
I'll be honest with you. Courtney Brown is the first name that popped into my head when you said that, and I didn't even, that was really at the beginning of my, before my time really covered the team. He's the one that popped into my head, and a lot of guys had injuries and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it happens. It's hard to play football until you're 35 years old and succeed, but. Yeah, that's one.
The injury bug, I don't like throwing around the term bust, especially when it comes to injury bugs, but those guys kind of got bit by injuries, and it shortened what they were doing to the NFL.
Certainly in LeVar's case.
And Courtney never really got going, for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney from the perspective that he was arguably one of the most dominating Penn State players I ever witnessed. But then you also have to look, can you only stay healthy, but do you have a taste for the NFL and what it means? And I don't know if everybody does, because it's different than college. And
not everybody does.
You hate to say someone's better than that, but if you get in there and your priorities kind of don't align with that, it's going to be hard to grind through it. Maybe when you have issues. Now, Courtney was dominating, so I think on paper he's number one. But they've had other guys. It's a brutal sport. Look at Kajana, never got really a chance.
Well, that's a real extreme example of the injury thing. Yeah.
If you looked at Curtis Enos as partway through his junior season, you would have thought if there's anyone built to withstand the pounding and being an explosive running back, it would be him. But of course, that whole situation was not together at all. Larry Johnson was a good NFL player, but it's hard because the NFL is such, to me, it's almost more of a surprise when guys last and do as well as you so-called think. Like Saquon, I would have thought with his position and the way things were going, there's no way we would see what we're seeing now at this point in his career. And that's nothing against him. That's the nature of the violent sport. So
not only nature of the violent sport, but the nature of how many things have to be in place.
Exactly.
He went from the worst team situation for him, maybe in the league, to probably the best. All those moving parts in a football team factor into it. And look what he's doing right now. He's going to get MVP votes. He's not going to win the MVP, but he's going to get MVP votes this year.
And then you have
more kudos to someone like him than detracting from others who don't, because there's so many reasons why. More than anything in this sport, to me.
A lot of moving parts.
Then you have guys like Bobby Ingram, first-round draft pick, doesn't really make it with the Bears, but is in the league forever as a wide receiver, just collecting paychecks and doing his thing, playing in Super Bowls with the Seahawks and things. Guys like Jordan Norwood lasted longer than you would ever think, and Deion Butler. And, it's funny how the NFL works out. It really is. Guys, I had a ton of fun this season. We're going to get back to it soon. And we'll have plenty more on the Blue White Tailgate podcast with other sports. Penn State basketball we'll be touching on with Coach Rhodes. Frank, you're smiling. Yes, you are going to be invited on those all the time as well.
Right.
Going to get you covered.
How about Penn State wrestling too?
Penn State wrestling. I got some phone numbers in my cell phone and Rolodex that keep you interested and things like that. We'll get them going. So we'll take a week off here, let everybody collect their breath from traveling coast to coast and desert to seashore and all that. So I want to thank everybody for listening, sending in the emails, and joining us on the inaugural season of the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. For Mike Rose, Frank Bonanni, I'm Andrew Callista, and a big shout out to all of our guests this year throughout the first Penn State football season. More to come with all of Penn State sports here on the Blue White Tailgate Podcast. Have a good one.